and we come back with the first academic lecture of this school, and it's the one of Mafini Dosso on smart specialization strategies in the Global South. So Mafini is an economist and a policy analyst at the JRC, and she made a PhD at the University of Paris-La Sorbonne. And she's leading the scientific works on smart specialization strategies in Sub-Saharan Africa at GRC. And she has also worked for several years within the GRC's Industrial Research and Innovation Group. So Mafini, the floor is yours. For all the attendees of the students, you can ask your question in the chat, and then I will read them and ask your question to Mafini after the speech. So please start.
Thank you very much, Andre. Thanks a lot for the introduction and for the co-organization of this very nice winter school. I thought at the beginning that my presentation would be during the week so that the student would be able to touch upon the European experience before getting to the global experiences. So when I understood, because of the schedule game, that I will start it first, I was also happy because then I decided to present you something starting from the origin of the smart specialization so that you could understand why actually it was so easy and so there was so much interest in the smart specialization experience in Europe and in trying to apply the concept outside of Europe. Not the whole concept, as I would see part of it. So the lecture is an academic lecture, but it's actually a lecture about policy. As you will understand, smart specialization is EU-based. I have the feedback of echo. Smart specialization is an EU-based policy approach. Sorry, I'll set up my screen. Very good. So I decided to go back to the origin of smart specialization strategies because also I don't know how much you are knowledgeable about the concept and the policy approach. So the first section will be dedicated to where does the smart specialization strategy concept is coming from and why it came into the policy arena into the first place, so the regional policy arena. The second part of the presentation will jump directly to what I call the global south. So I'm not touching upon all the global south, but only about part of the global south. And as Andre said, I'm leading the conceptual work on the sub-Saharan African economy. So of course I have more expertise and more, let's say, feedback from how this is the thinking about smart specialization is starting here in Africa. So I would just go through the different broad regional experiences and hoping that you will have at least some sense on how we can think about the concept outside Europe, taking into account the original rationale of the concept itself. So smart specialization strategy is an EU-made policy approach. Coming back before the first formal adoption or initiation of the smart specialization strategy program, the thinking about smart specialization and let's say the policies to address regional development or spatial development challenges came about after 2005, in between 2006 and 2009, within a group called the Knowledge for Growth group in the Joint Research Center, actually in Sevilla, where we are based and where the platform is hosted. So the thinking and the policy advices or information has started in between these years and has given rise to what we call today the smart specialization concept. So if you want to situate the smart specialization concept within the policy, let's say, landscape, you can put it within what we call the European cohesion policy. For those who do not know, it's the European cohesion policy is the EU policy for regional development. And smart specialization came into a context of broad policy reform and questioning about the place-based and the spatial dimension of the policy, about how to involve more stakeholders and more diverse stakeholders in the decision-making about regional development, and how we can we can accept that we need some policy experimentation at some point, and we should better, in this case, define our results, so adopt what we call an objective-oriented approach, which does not prevent, of course, experimentalism. So at the time, again, before the official starting, smart specialization was already foreseen as one of the largest funding pan-European industrial policy program, which was applying or putting forward different principles in the way the territories, region, and countries at that time invest into science and innovation, and how they select or choose the priority for regional development based on the science, technology, and innovation resources and assets of the territory. So there were those principles of prioritization of innovation investment, mainly due to the fact that the resources were limited, and more if you're going into less advanced regions, there was a principle of concentration of the funding, and then of mobilization, mainly mobilization of the different stakeholders. We come back on this point later on, to guide the innovation investment. So different people, both from the academy sphere and from the policy sphere, has concord together and edited and published a book, or let's say a handbook, if we can call it, or a guidebook for what we call the regional and innovation strategies for smart specialization. So the smart specialization strategies are really knowledge and innovation-led development strategies. So the main aim was to put forward the role of research and innovation into the development of the territories, and also in front of the increasing inequalities we could observe in the geography of development. So, of course, there was a regulatory framework that was framing the development of the smart specialization, and which actually, to my opinion, has accelerated the implementation of the program. So in 2013, there was a regulation of the EU that applies to the European Regional Development Fund. At the time, one of the most important source of funding from the European cohesion policy. And basically, the regions and the country were asked to put in place a smart, or to design a smart specialization strategy, meaning to design strategies that will help them concentrating their resource on a few research and innovation priority domain, in order to maximize the impact on the growth, the job, and of the different territories. So it was an ex ante conditionality. So if you wanted to have access to those funds, you had to demonstrate that you were able, or you had started the design of a smart specialization strategy. So when you fix the things in this way, then of course, to access the fund, you will have let's say a fast adoption of the strategy, and that's what happened. And as of today, we have more than 120 and even more smart specialization strategies which are going on, of course, at different stage of development. So there is a reason, there are many reasons actually why the smart specialization concept came into. The first thing is that we were noticing that there was, let's say, a spreading around of the different resources, trying where governments, local or national, were trying to invest in many fields in order to a kind of lottery, no? So when you are a big country and you have enough resources to spread them over different innovation domain, it might be fine. Then you should look at the studies on specialization of at the macro level. But if you are a small region, your budget is limited, and you want to have an impact of your investment on the socio-economic development of your territories, then it matters maybe that you focus your resource on these few research and innovation priorities. Now, the reason why the thinking about smart specialization came in was mainly because we noticed a shortcomings or failure into what we call the regional innovation systems. So we were noticing that clearly some regional innovation system, or let's say urban megalopole, were actually increasing the gap with many less advanced region. And the issues were noticed at different level, at the level of the governance. What is what are the level of capabilities of the local government? You also had this syndrome of imitation of what was going on into the top tech pole in the world, so that imitation of Silicon Valley type of specialization. And there was no much or not straightforward or systematic evidence collection on the structure, economic, social, and innovative structure of the region. And you could notice different level of public involvement. And the who of the smart specialization strategy means who should act for the smart specialization strategy. Of course, you have the policy leadership, but in the smart specialization strategy framework, the entrepreneurial knowledge is the knowledge coming from different sources or different stakeholders, depending on what they are doing. So the knowledge is coming both from the industry, the market side, and is coming also from the education, from the research, also from the government, and of course from the civil society. So the interaction between, let's say, those four helices should help better the territory in a bottom-up setting to identify the priority for innovation. So you understood what I'm meaning, and this will be the object of a lab you will have on the entrepreneurial discovery process, where you will better understand the dynamic and the fundamentals of this process, which is at the core of the smart specialization strategy. So the how is about how to drive structural change, whether in terms of modernization of your territory, of your industries, transition, or more toward more, let's say, radical change in your technological and development path. There were initially, of course, the funds were open to different type of region, but of course the target was clearly less developed region with many failures in the research and innovation, in the regional innovation systems, and with few impacts of innovation on their development. So there were some steps that were identified in the original guide for research and innovation strategies. Of course, not all countries, not all territories, and it's explained explicitly in the guide, have to go through all these different steps. But for the region that are less endowed in terms of governance capability, innovation management capabilities, or innovation monitoring capabilities, it could be useful for them and relevant to go through the different steps of a smart specialization strategy design. So the first step of a smart specialization strategy design is the analysis of the region and the potential for innovation. So it might look a bit let's say, abstract in some sense, but it's really about, if you take the economic or the industrial side, it's really about what your firms are doing, how they are innovating in terms of product, of process, and how this innovation impact their productivity, and what are the position of your firms into the global value chain, into the regional value chain. The potential, these steps also involve that you look at the scientific performance and the innovation performance of your territory. Scientific meaning, for example, which kind of knowledge the region is producing, what is the position of the region into the science, let's say, the research, the science systems of the European science system, or for example at the world level. Do you have high talented scientists that are producing in a certain field? How many? Do you reach some critical masses in the different potential? So the policy application for now, where we are, I don't know if we have time to discuss here, but we focus mainly on 3 dimensions into the analysis. And this is very important. This is why I'm stopping a bit on this point, because it has given rise to a lot of works, a great literature on empirics of smart specialization. And since 5-6 years, we have dedicated academic conference, dedicated sessions that are analyzing or focusing on this aspect of which kind of evidence is used to inform the smart specialization, and how this evidence can be used to monitor the trend, the evolution of a region on its path to the smart specialization strategy. The second step, of course, for regions that are not endowed with a proper governance structure is to set up a governance, can be through smart specialization teams or through the regional or innovation development agencies. The third is, again, a collective endeavor, and it's about sharing, developing a shared vision about the future of the region. Do we want to be the next green bioforestry oriented region of Europe? Do we want to be the hub of automobile technology or high-speed network technologies in Europe? And how do we position ourselves? Which are our assets to have or to actually hold properly this vision? So there are different thinking about how the region would decide which path they would like to take, but this has to be expressed at some point, and it has to be as much as possible consensual. Then the fourth step is the selection of priority for regional development. Again, here a lot of empirical literature on the level of these priorities, but in the smart specialization or regional thinking, these priorities were neither sectors, neither group of firms or targeted firms. They were more in between the two, because they are defined as an activity domain. So they can bring different sectoral, different technological, and even different territorial competencies together. So once the priorities are selected and they are revised afterwards, of course, because experimentation is a law in the smart specialization framework, you have to design a set of instruments, of policy instruments and financial also instruments that will support the experimentation that is open by the smart specialization strategy. And then the sixth steps is the integration of monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. So I put here some example of the work or the evidence that have been produced on the practice of smart specialization. So it's different to, I mean, act or be involved directly into the design of a smart specialization than in just reading the report. But in this report, you can have a sense of the diversity of the opportunities from smart specialization, but also on the diversity of the challenge. As you can see, the concept is not only about 6 steps. As you can see, it's touching different dimensions. So which kind of monitoring mechanism we put in place for smart specialization, and how do we implement smart specialization if we go down to the let's say the domain approach, such as here in agri-food? What kind of multi-level governance can help to sustain the smart specialization strategy, and importantly, which kind of skills of education capabilities would come with the elaboration, with the design and the future impact of a smart specialization strategies. So there are different, let's say, practice about smart specialization. And I think here you have some example of different of works that have been produced by the joint research centers, and this is available on the EU Science Hub. There are much more works, but I put here only a few of them. Also, as I was saying before, and I will not get into the debate, the academic work and communities have flourished around the smart specialization. Online or physical communities have flourished. But since 2016, the Joint Research Center and the Smart Specialization Platform in Seville, Spain, are organizing, let's say, an academic and policy conference about smart specialization and its impact on the innovation capabilities and its meaning for the renaissance of some territories or the development of other territories. So you can go on the website and found the different sets of rationale of the conference, but most importantly, the different works that are being done on the smart specialization concept. It's difficult in one presentation to synthesize at the same time the policy concept and give you a sense of all the literature about smart specialization. Basically, each of the steps of the smart specialization is subject to empirical investigation. So although we don't know actually all the impact, I like to say the quantitative, because qualitatively there are many impacts on the quality of governance, on the understanding of innovation within region, on the way innovation is managed, and the monitoring and evaluation mechanism. But meanwhile, we are advancing, let's say, experimenting in Europe, the concept already flew away in different regions of the world by curiosity or just for the purposes of knowledge exchange. So it's very interesting to see that the same kind of issues in terms of spatial inequalities, in terms of concentration of wealth into a few pole, in terms of low capabilities to handle innovation at the local level. It's very interesting to see that these just broad terminologies about development and innovation policy challenges are actually similar across the different regions of the world. Of course, the level of capability, the initial level of capabilities is clearly different, and this will definitely shape how smart specialization will unfold into the different regions of the world. Of course, nobody waits for us researchers to understand the dynamic, properly the dynamic and the impact of the smart specialization strategy. But one fact is interesting is that at least the smart specialization concept brought such interest in the policy world and in the academic world that we are just let's say opening, let's say, some collaboration and dialogue path about the smart specialization experience outside. Now, if we focus on the Latin American dimension of our activity, of the activity, which is a partnership with DG under the program of the International Urban Cooperation for Sustainable and Innovation Cities, supported by the European Commission in partnership with several regions and countries in Latin America, you can see that over the different components I put here, clearly there was a strong interest and dialogue and different knowledge exchanges that were initiated in the frame of the region-to-region cooperation on innovation for local and regional development. Again, this is the same issue. So you have this move of deconcentration, of decentralization, at different level in Latin America or in Africa, and then you realize that the governance capabilities are not there. So you may allow a region to region or city to city collaboration, because then the knowledge generated by smaller or of a lesser scale territories in Europe can also be useful for other regions in the world. So of course, there are strength, weakness, and different opportunities. I'm not coming back all of them, but one thing is important is that even in Africa, anytime that we want to start the smart specialization cooperation, we have to consider a long period of awareness and of sensibilization, of understanding of the smart specialization approach. And this is stronger if you have territories where even the notion of innovation, there is not much awareness about the notion of innovation. In Latin America, there were already some experiences of multi-stakeholder involvement. And as I told you, the entrepreneurial discovery process is actually based on the dialogue between the different stakeholders of the society in order to identify the priorities. So the fact that there were already existing similar experiences of multi-stakeholdership in Latin America is, of course, a big strength. And as many regions in Europe, they are also facing and maybe strike a funding constraint and difficulties in prioritizing their innovation investment and in designing some monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. And I would say that you may think at this time, at this moment, that so why you want to do smart specialization in all these places? One of the reasons is actually that if European region and other region in the world actually learn how to support their regional development strategy, their regional development priority domain through spending more on research and innovation. So there's no reason why these different experiments could not also serve into other places around the world. So it's about knowledge exchange and it's about practice also based exchange. Again, on the Latin American, let's say, aspect, there's been different publication. Most of them here are being a technical report from the Joint Research Center or national, as you can say, national technical report, focusing on how to enhance the productive and the productivity and the innovation performances of the different territories. So for those who know how to read Spanish or Portuguese, I invite you to go and check. But there have been some work dedicated to also, let's say, analyzing the different path for collaboration between Latin America and the EU. And it seems that smart specialization, actually, given the interest and given the pilot that are already starting, has a great potential to bridge, to act as an innovation bridge between the EU and Latin America. So this paper is a, let's say, it's a surprise in the sense that the paper is not yet published, but as you would, as you may imagine, I also rely on and also collaborate with researchers in Latin America. Meanwhile, we are trying to bring the concept in Africa. So I thought, and the researcher is named Rika Espasa Masana. There is an ongoing, let's say, there are ongoing experiments on smart specialization in Latin America, but not yet a lot of academic papers. Not a lot of academic papers have been published on this dimension. Of course, for a moment, the concept is really at the level of policy dialogue, of knowledge exchanges, and of experimental multi-stakeholderships setting. But I thought it was interesting. The paper is forthcoming, has been already accepted, for you to know that there are already in-depth investigation about the appropriateness and the applicability of the concept and of this different dimension of the concept outside Europe. So in this paper on the Piura region in the north of Peru, there is, of course, a questioning about the logic of regionalization and of smart specialization in Latin American region, and questions about the appropriateness of this concept in the case of the Piura region. So there is a general, of course, thinking about how smart specialization could be uptaken into emerging economies, and how how innovation policies, which is normally in Latin America, in those states, and also in Africa, highly centralized, how this type of policy could gradually pass over, let's say, the governance capabilities at a lower level of the state. And there is, of course, in the logics of the smart specialization, there is, of course, this sense that science, this rationale that science and technology policies can help address the structural issues that some of these regions are facing, such as the low productivity, the low investment in research and development, and the very weak capabilities to export high-tech products or develop fundamental technological knowledge through patents. So the Piura region is the second largest region after Lima, and it contributes to about 4% of Peru gross development product. According to the classification of regional innovation systems, it's a region with weak institutional ties and very low capabilities, structural capabilities for innovation. The smart specialization experiences, if I well remember, started with grants allocated to the University of Piura. So this means that in this region, the smart specialization will be led mainly, led mainly by the university, and co-led, of course, by the regional government, which has a very low capabilities to handle this type of strategy. And if you look into the smart specialization in Europe, there's a whole branch of thinking that has been developed and work that has been developed on the role of higher education institution and smart specialization. And clearly, there is an inspiration from this thematic line into the experience found in the Piura region. So this experience in Latin America, as explained by Rika, has allowed, of course, to undertake an exercise of data collection never done at this level in order to present the regional structure of the region. And of course, this was led by the University of Piura. The entrepreneurial discovery process, so to help foster the stakeholders' commitment, went through different phases. But among the key results that they have now is that there is clearly an higher commitment of the stakeholder, or let's say the mobilization around smart specialization strategies in order to identify the future path or the future priorities of the region. Again, here you can see what the smart specialization beyond the data collection, also beyond the contribution in terms of mobilization of multi-stakeholdership. You can see also that the smart specialization has allowed to establish gradually, or is allowing to establish gradually, a participatory governance model. So it's not yet as one would think about the perfect participatory and inclusive governance model, but it's already a great beginning, and it's really an important change in this type of emerging economies. So smart specialization is also bringing legitimacy to both the participatory governance model and to the bottom-up components of innovation policy. So just to the last section, I think I still have a bit of time. Andre hasn't stopped me so far, so it's very nice. So the last section is actually the one I'm leading. So I hope I can make you understand what we are trying to do with Sub-Saharan Africa. But there are some contextual elements that are important for you to have to understand why, maybe, because the how is still under thinking. Why this type of concept could actually help to unlock or to solve or to address, or at least to contribute to the solution to some of the challenge observed in between the different territories across Africa. So I just put the map of the report of the World Bank, Africa Poverty Report. So we often hear about Africa is rising, Africa is rising. So I like the title, Poverty in a Rising Africa, because yes, Africa is rising. There's much more dynamics about innovation in Africa, both as the institutional level and also at the let's say firm level, technologies creation level, etc. But you can observe that inequalities have not been decreasing in Africa, and they are the product of multi-dimensional factors. I mean, from education, from where you are living in a rural area or not, or in more nuanced dimension of in between urban and the rural area, those cities that are often forgotten. And you also have the inequalities in access to education, in access to basic infrastructure such as water, electricity, banking services, etc., etc. So you understand that, okay, that was one of the original causes or original rationale of smart specialization in Europe, the territorial or spatial inequalities. The fact that different territories were not benefiting from the fruits of the growth, but the fact also that different territories, because of different resources, because of different governance capabilities, were not able, or were actually increasing the gap with the other leading regions. So the same is actually happening in Africa, where you have big cities concentrating all the services, all the different, let's say, more knowledge intensive activities as compared to agricultural related activities in rural area. So their rationale were different rationales where you want to why you want to think at least about smart specialization in Sub-Saharan Africa, beside the great interest that the community, both the science community and the African level institution are putting on the concept. There is something that in the last 10, 15 years in Africa, there's been an uptake of science, technology, and innovation policies and strategies in different countries with different speeds. But what is sure for now is that at the continental level, there is a policy awareness that led to the design and the edition of the Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa, where both the challenges, let's say transversal continental challenges are underlined, but also where the priority domain are at the level of the continent. At the same time, again, at different speeds, depending on the national context, country have implemented institutions for innovation, either in the form of agencies, like in Kenya or Nigeria, or in the forms of ministries, like in Rwanda, or in the form of funds, like we have here in Cote d'Ivoire, in West Africa. And at the same time, we had an increase in the funding of innovation, both for innovation and incubator. And I must say, of course, there is a greater focus on what we call the tech startup, which actually do not represent the biggest part of our economy so far. And there is this move of decentralization, of course, at different speeds in the different countries. And there's a recent study, I think, published in co-authoring by Andre Rodriguez-Pose, working actually on decentralization and the quality of governance in the decentralized states of Africa. So this type of paper is already very interesting to see, or to try to assess how much challenging would be to launch such type of strategies in Africa. Now you have the same challenge, but much more exacerbated, because it's only an early movement. You have very low governance capabilities in a context of rising multidimensional spatial inequalities and limited state resources and science, technology, and innovation funding. There are progress on this level, but much of the progress is done mainly, or is coming from international organization or international donors so far. And of course, you have a place where a formal sector prevails. A priori, you don't have a lot of studies about the innovation in the formal sector, but I should have put it that some colleagues in South Africa, Erika Kramer, for now, she's at the Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose, led by Masukato, and she did a book on the hidden potential of the innovation in the informal sector. So for those who are interested in how innovation processes work in this sector, you can check this book from Erika Kramer. I will spend less time on the thinking about smart specialization in the African STI policy concept, just explaining you how you start thinking about it. So you need, of course, to understand how the national innovation systems are shaped, and of course, whether there is a science, technology, and innovation
5 minutes.
Okay. 5 minutes. Thank you, Andre. Whether there is an innovation policy already implemented. But if you look into the works that have been done on innovation policy in Africa, unfortunately, focusing mostly on Anglophone countries, but at the continental level, you have some important challenges that have been underlined in the strategic documents of the African Union. So we put this challenge in front, and we try to see in the smart specialization approach, which kind of dimension, or which steps, or which approach, or which tool sometime at the level of the tool could help to address this challenge. That doesn't mean that smart specialization can help address all those challenges. And maybe in the practical implementation, we will need to focus on some or one or two of the challenge, and in the facing vis-a-vis the smart specialization experiences in Europe and concept, and also international experiences. Again, we keep on analyzing the different challenges that you have in the implementation of innovation policy. And one important one is that often they have the strategy writing, but they do not have the implementation plan. And you will see that you can have, because consulting firm can do it, many also experts from the different university and Pan-African organization can support for the strategy writing, even for the monitoring and for the survey, for instance, through the African Observatory of Science, Technology and Innovation. So it seems that in practice, there are some obstacles about how do I implement in practice this policy. And if you remember what I said at the beginning, smart specialization is of course theory-based, but is also a practice-based concept. So it would be very interesting to see, and we had a lot of positive feedback on how these different steps could be undertaken and implemented or adopted or even modified or revised for countries that want to include a bottom-up component in the innovation policy making, and that want to strengthen, in this case of the African countries, the institutional structure for innovation. We went a bit further than just conceptual analysis, and this we studied through a Joint Research Center exploratory research program in cooperation with different university researchers from Europe, but also from Rwanda and from in between, actually. So we asked them, and in the room there were only experts, people that know a bit about innovation, of course. So it means that we may have it to do another step once we want to popularize the concept. But in this already first knowledge exchange, in this first kind of word cafe session, we already had a sense of the multi-level challenges that smart specialization strategy could pose if undertaken in this concept. But importantly, is that they saw also the smart specialization both as a tool to underline and to formalize the different challenges of the innovation policy and territorial development in their context, but was also helping them to try to understand, if you want, kind of reverse thinking, how their priorities have been selected. So there was a great agreement about the fact that smart specialization could really help for commitment and coordination. But then I think that much more empirics and pilot action, maybe at the level of the city of Kigali or else, could be undertaken, or in another country. So there have been the work on Africa are only starting, but the scientific and the academic thinking of course is already taking off. And we had in last December a discussion with researchers from South Africa, and also another speaker that we have in the winter school, Roberta Rabelotti, to discuss about how smart specialization could help better frame the green diversification and the green diversification opportunities, and then help for the territorial transformation. One of the key lessons, and this is my last slide, Andre, sorry. One of the key lessons, especially from experts from South Africa and from Pan-African scope, was that there was already some territorial collaboration. There's a great tradition about discussion, dialogue, but then of course there's a low awareness about innovation, especially at the local level. But most importantly, in the frame of the African Free Trade Continental Area, what would be important in the smart specialization, or what might be important, are the territorial and the spatial collaboration going across or beyond the borders of single African states. So how smart specialization could actually impact on this type of territorial and industrial collaboration, both in terms of resource, but in terms of knowledge exchange, in terms of synergy building, etc. So I put, just to finish, I put the link of the EU Science Hub, where you can find all the reports on smart specialization. So there are tens of pages on the different technical aspects of the smart specialization strategy as they are practiced in policy, but also dedicated journals that are focusing on territorial and spatial development. For now, the journal where you find the most references, to my knowledge, about smart specialization is in regional studies. But don't forget that smart specialization is based on decades of territorial development theory, of spatial development, of economic geography. So it's not a concept coming out of nowhere. Maybe that can be the origin of a critics about the concept, is theoretical based, but this did not stop the policy to run ahead of theory. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mafini, for this very broad presentation. So at that moment, I don't see any question in the chat. So please ask your question if you have, because you are the students and that's your role, and that we need to have your questions. But just to start the discussion, I will ask you one question, and that's not an easy question because that's a question about the possibility to translate, let's say, the smart specialization, which was originally based on industry or technological innovation, let's say, and that's the start of the work by Fauré and also the person working on that. There were specialists of technological innovation. Yeah, and how is it possible to translate it in something broader, what you stated, and especially regarding two main challenges. One is about the question of governance, and the other one, in my opinion, is the question of informality, because as you stated, probably informality is full of innovation, but how can you identify it? How can you broaden it? How can you put it on the table in the end?
Thanks a lot, Andre. Indeed, Andre, and I'm one of the few, at least in this case, that adhere to the industrial fundamentals or to the technology strategy discussion in the Fauré initial works. And I could not present everything here, but there were, at the same time that you had the science, technology, and innovation policy growing in Africa, you are much more, you have to go much more back in time to see that there were already industrial plans. There were industrial plans, industrial strategy, but they were done at the national level. Now, what happened when you start opening, let's say, clusters, industrial parks, industrial zone in the different places of your country? Then you often, what happened here, bring the territorial questioning about with the industrial questioning. And there is a way to translate. They are not incompatible. There is a way to translate into industrial innovation and territorial development, but maybe the concept of industry should be much broader than what we are thinking here in terms of automobile, pharmacy. We have to think broader about services, creativity, and in terms of modernizing or let's say revamping the traditional techniques we have in the African context. So the territorial dimension is not incompatible with the industrial dimension, mostly also because, as I was mentioning, the paper of Andres Rodriguez posed, and also in the case of Cote d'Ivoire, where I am now, you have, of course, much more, let's say, autonomy given to the region, whether good or not. But given that you have this autonomy, at the same time you have the dynamic of industrial park flourishing, then at some point you are bound to think about the territories and the industry together. So this is, of course, an additional challenge, but this is where I think the smart specialization could be more impactful in terms of trying to understand in the different territories which kind of industrial opportunities or diversification or just modernization opportunities could be flagged. Regarding the governance and therefore informality, I can go pragmatical or spend a lot of time into philosophy. For some countries, you will need a leadership at a high level. Rwanda, you have innovation is considered as a high priority at the highest level. So if you put innovation, education at the highest priority on the agenda, you may start to initiate a kind of governance structure. But you have to know that there's been a lot of change in the African context, as I was mentioning before. 10 years ago, we didn't have the National Agency for Innovation in Kenya. We did not have the Ministry of Innovation in Rwanda. We did not have a Chief of Innovation Officer next to the President in Liberia. We didn't have the funds for innovation in Cote d'Ivoire and in Senegal. So there is something coming, but the governance, we have the chance with smart specialization, I think, maybe to shape the governance of something that is already starting. So yes, we will have a great phase of awareness, but I think that all the efforts are converging toward this awareness about innovation and management of innovation and territorial development. And I think smart specialization is right in time to influence this policy and institutional change in Africa, but the capability building at different level. And this is where we are focusing now on the pilot for Rwanda, which type of capability building and competencies should be constructed or should be strengthened to be able to handle at least the understanding and the management of the strategy in initial pilot zones. Regarding the informality, sorry, just the points on the informality. This is where it's true. It's often easy to say that there's a lot of innovation in informality, but there is. I mean, I'm living it every day. There's a lot of innovation now. The impact in terms of economic growth is not so clear or is not so strong, but the impact in terms of social development is important. So at some point, we will have
well-being as well.
Exactly. Thank you, Andre. Exactly, the well-being. And I will answer, and just to close the question, because I took a lot of time answering, except if you want more. Someone was saying, and it's Erica Kramer, chair of the Industrial and Innovation Policy at some point in the Saki in South Africa, and now visiting researcher in London, in the UK. She said that in Africa, informal is normal. So when you will be doing the mapping, you will need to map this informality. Whatever happens, you will need to map it. Now, if the question is Mafini, but we will never manage to map informality because the mobility in this sector is so high. But actually, there have been some experimental of geographical and spatial mapping at the level of territorial, at the very like 1 kilometer square scope by the United Nations agency, UN Habitat. So there is a lot of mapping of the territorial, economic, and functional activities of the territory, but they're not yet used because also you have a capability issues, both in interpretation and in the usage of data. But the experiment that have been run by other development agencies, such as the UN at the special level or in the mapping or the special development framework, they call it, could be really useful when we would like to start mapping the informal sectors activity. Plus, with the COVID, we managed to have a lot of much more information on the informality because you had to send the different social transfers from the state. So we now starting, at least in some countries, to build up a kind of data base, if we can call it, about the different activities in the informal sectors.
So thank you very much, Mafini. Now there are a few questions. We'll try to take part of them. So first question, I will ask you to shorten a bit the responses. First question is about the territorial level. So what territorial level will be the most suitable for a smart specialization strategies in Africa, level, NUTS 2, and so on and so on?
Okay. No, this has to be decided case by case because of, take just two countries. Ivory Coast have classical regions where you have about 30 regions, but in Nigeria, they have the states and it's much bigger. So do you cut the state within the state or at the level of the state? This has to be decided on the case by case basis. And I don't think we should let ourselves so much influenced by the administrative boundaries, which often are not translating the true interaction processes. We can see it in the cross-borders activities here in Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a question about participatory governance model. Maybe you can respond in a separate way. And of course, you will find the question. And the question is, I'm especially inspired by the participatory governance model. Can you suggest us some sources where we can find it fully explained? Maybe you can provide information part, okay?
Yeah, so, sure. I can send it to you, Andre. Okay.
Yeah, and also to Sabrina and maybe to all the panelists, because I think you have to remind that we are here for 1 week. So, okay, there are plenty of opportunities to exchange. Another question is about the question of rationality. How is the more rational way, according to smart specialization, to set priorities to contribute to political agenda and in particular for the European territory, which are the factors in terms of priority setting that are used in order to select ex post the virtuous cases of political implementation and intervention.
That's a thesis subject. But this is not, but you have to know fundamentally, just to be short, because we are not, don't have much time, you will discover, I might say, Andre, that you will discover in the different session, especially in the lab session, about the participatory model of smart specialization. So there you will have a lot of reference, but I will add some on the African and on the developing world context for those that are interested. For the priority selection is actually subject to much debate now, also because there are criticisms about how vague the priorities can be. But in the smart specialization setting, what is important is that priorities are not decided by only one group of the society, but that they come from discussion and exchange with both the people that will produce the knowledge, the new research, people that will make the products, the new processes, people that will consume or use these innovations, etc. So it's a much broader thinking about the structural change in the territory. And of course, because you do the analysis of the regional structure and potential, you can see that at some point, what you talk about within the entrepreneurial discovery group, what you found as an empirical basis, and of course, the positioning analysis of the region, these different elements will be input into the priority selection process. So it's not at all a linear process. There's no one size fits all. And this, we always say that in the smart specialization, but you have to know that these different inputs make the strategy, would make the strategy more likely to succeed or just to be sustained. Think about it. The input in terms of evidence, the input in terms of entrepreneurial knowledge, broad entrepreneurial knowledge, and the input in terms of international expertise and positioning analysis, and then the regional dialogue. All these elements will contribute normally in the ideal smart specialization to identify those priorities. In practice, we observe a lot of different cases where often, unfortunately, sometimes you have just a kind of imitation of the formulation of other regions. But you have some region where smart specialization and in many regions has unlocked dialogue that were not existing before for the selection of the priority. So the dialogue, the evidence are really important in the positioning in the priority setting in smart specialization. Get all the ingredients so you can make the proper cake. At least you can try to make it.
Okay, thank you. So it will be the last question, and it's about the lack of a relative scarcity of resources. So I'm pretty sensible to this question because we just published a book on the question of smart development for rural areas, and I think that more or less we face the same questions. And then this question is about what kind of industrial policy could you suggest to break the trajectory dependence of stagnant or lagged regions, mainly developing countries, because there are generally few resources that can be applied and combined as well.
Well, I'm not sure I can answer about the whole industrial policy itself, because there's a lot of actually discussion in Europe about the revamping or what are the new stance, what's the new stance of the industrial policy. But again, because your resources are limited, then you may have to make smarter choices in a sense, not? Smart specialization is also about allowing for experimentation. And most importantly, the resources that you have in the territory are not the only resources that will be used in the smart specialization process. Firstly, because they are European level resources, as I explained in the presentation. But what I find was interesting for these issues of resources, the development of what we call industrial or thematic partnership through the smart specialization experience, where you have, now we have, I think, 3 thematic partnership in smart specialization: energy, agro-food, and industrial modernization. So what is happening in these partnerships is that they come together, of course, because they have similar priorities or close priorities, but also because there's a possibility to create knowledge synergy and resource synergy, and to try to find a complementary position within the regional or local global value chain. So there are different ways of addressing these issues of resource, but I think collaboration is a privilege at the time of great globalization.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I think it's finished. We stop for this session. So thank you very much, Mafini. Thank you for everybody to have started to ask questions. So we are experimenting. And now you know that in 5 minutes, we have we continue with the school, especially about presentation of a week and the very famous special quiz of the summer and winter ERSA schools. So please follow the link for the session special quiz. So I think that we have an appointment all together at 4:35 for the special quiz session. So thank you very much. Now I close this session. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Andre. Thank you all.